All right, everybody, welcome to the January 23rd meeting of the Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District. All right, before I call this to question, Larry, will you verbalize your recommendation, please?
Sure. It's recommended that the Board of Trustees approve the inclusion of an Acton Agua Dulce Unified School District logo on the Welcome to Acton signs being erected by Aidan and Vidic as part of his Boy Scout Eagle project.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the board support me in directing the superintendent to prepare a letter memorializing the board's action to go with your attachment to your Eagle Scout application.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Call to question.
Aye.
4 board members, aye. Board president, aye. 5-0. Congratulations, young man. We're very proud of you. We are working on a district-wide civility statement. You'll find when that's passed, it will reflect my expectations of how we interact with each other when we're speaking to the board and with each other. I think you'll see that sometime in February. Larry's going to give us an update on that. When you step up to the microphone, please understand that when this light goes on, you speak, and when it's done, you stop. Understand that the board will not and cannot make comments about things that are not on the agenda. I will admonish my fellow board members that one things I've hated about governance, whether it's where I work or anywhere else, is when somebody stands up there and tells us what they want to hear and we can't respond back, but we can at least hear, or I can suggest the superintendent make a phone call. The one thing I do not want to happen is when that person leaves and goes out to their car and goes home later, for us to, during board member comments, sneak in a little snipe at whoever spoke and exercise our opinions. And me being the new board president, I don't think I've ever said that to you, but I'm sure everyone's really clear about what I'm saying. This is one of my initiatives. I asked that the 3 groups formulate this. I wanted the statement that's read in IEP meetings to be considered as a basic foundation. I don't want to read a thick book, but it will be read at the onset of any meeting in which a decision is made that affects the students of this district. I will not be here for the first read, but this is not something that we're going to bring in and board members dance all over it and change it around and do a bunch of editing. I'm going to want it to be accepted coming from our community and our voters, and I would hope you would respect that, and I would expect to come back at the second meeting. Callie will be running the meeting on February 13th. The agenda management and everything will be handed over to Callie. As the board president, I get lovely documents from the Los Angeles County Office of Education, like telling us that Ms. David is doing a fine job as the fiscal manager of our district, or whatever your title is. Thank you. LACOE has confirmed with us that we are under positive certification for this fiscal year as well as the next 2 years. I remember sitting in the audience in 2014 when there was a FICMAT report going on, and there was a LACOE appointed board advisor going in the back. So we were going from a place of declining enrollment and struggling with funds and things like that. Now, what has happened is LACOE is telling us, hey, we're looking good, but they give us the following admonishments that I want to tell you about. We still have declining enrollment. We're losing about 7%, okay? And I'm not going to comment on the things Callie's not going to comment about either. But when I ask for a civility statement, I'm telling you that part of what we do when we interact with people, whether they're our internal customers or external customers, depends a lot on whether somebody decides to send their kid back to our school tomorrow morning. There are organizational efficiencies that I'm also focused on. And what I tell the superintendent is, when you put something on the agenda, the strategic report, I don't want to know that the community wasted their time in putting and participating in something that turns into a fluff manual that thick that sits on some executive shelf and we check that box. It's a living, breathing document. And within there, you will find mostly that when you have a problem with an organization, if you look to their strategic plan and they don't have one, that's a huge problem. But this one does, and I think that unless you've been living under a rock, you can see that the parent groups in this district, namely PTO, booster and PTSO have been empowered to the point where they have a monthly meeting with their site principal. 2 weeks later, mysteriously, that same group of people comes to the superintendent's office and meets with the superintendent. So again, unless I'm living under a rock politically, I can figure out that if they go to the site and talk about some problems that they think they're having and they're prioritized and it's organized, I think the principal is probably smart enough to figure out if they don't relate that to the district office, those parents will do that directly 2 weeks later. That design is not by error, so figure that out, please. I would suggest that if you do have a problem with the way things are running to the district, that your roadmap is the strategic plan, because within that strategic plan, especially Part 3, Sections 2 and 4, you will find how community support is supposed to be built. And if you have a problem, edify your concern, not with emotion, but looking through that document and saying, you know what I'm talking about is right there. And go to your site representative at your school, find out who they are, sit down with them, get calmed down if you need to be calmed down, but people don't just freak out. I used to be the worst gadfly in the world out there. The bottom line is, and I still can be, I might resign tonight, I miss it, but at the end of the day, go to your site representative, whoever that parent is. They're in the same boat you are. They have kids and the challenges we all have. But sit down with them and say, here's my concern. They can present that in a civil way and bring it up and memorialize it, because these meetings are memorialized and there's minutes taken and there are accountability points that come back to this board, and that's how we rate his performance outside of the wonderful comments that Nick made tonight. So I want you to know how important it is that you band together as parents and civilly come forward, because without civility, an organization will fail. When the organization fails, our enrollment goes down, and then we get the rest of this. When you're negotiating labor contracts, do not dig into your reserves with declining enrollment, because that's not a stable funding source. We've been warned about that. That is the charter revenue that we're being very careful with that's in reserve right now. And they're saying charter school oversight, be very careful about how you oversee these charter schools, because if they create liabilities that you're unaware of, suddenly we become financially responsible. And that was one of my trademarks when I sat out there, along with how the special education students have been treated in this district. I will tell you that some of the initiatives that have been most near and dear to me going back 10 years are only coming forward now because people are supporting them, and I thank you all. Do I have anything else? I will be attending the iLead School Boards Conference, School Board Member Conference. So iLead has schools around. They bring people in, so their governance structure is monitored and these people are trained. This is kind of the equivalent of what we would call the California School Boards Association Conference. So I'm going to go over there and make sure they're on the ball, because again, LACOE is telling us watch it. So other than that, thank you all for being here tonight. I will memorialize this very quickly. SIATech has several sites. They are WIOA sites, meaning they're a federally funded alternative work program. You see people that are dropping out. You see people doing credit recovery. And this is more geared towards trade jobs in the public. So this is not something that falls under typical charter school law. So their sites are scattered around. Our lawyer has looked at this. And what this particular action is about is one of the sites has lost their lease. So they came forward and said, we're going to change our location. That requires them to have a material revision to go to this board. We ran them through the ringer, especially I do. I've got letters. It's all legit. So if you missed a special meeting we had, next time, if you have to move, I would hope that someone would give you a little bit better notice, but this has been processed to a T. So your recommendation is that we approve this material revision.
Yes.
You'll remember from the last time, this was, we had an election going on and there were some games going on. I hear people floating around saying this over here and this over there. And I like the pragmatic approach you took. It's almost struck me that the last time that there was oh, you know what, if we target the likely yes votes because we got the secret computer that tells us that, while we stay away from poking the hornet's nest of the people that won't vote no, that will vote no, and keep them in the dark as much as possible. I'm not a believer in that. You'll recall that facility condition ratings are really what feeds this process. You go around, I think there's a report comes from LACOE that tells you whether your stuff is junk. I think that the county in issuing Prop A funds also does spatially how many people there are versus what facility you have and what conditions that I had to participate that in my professional job. But at the end of the day, I like the way the results are put out, Mr. List. I like your pragmatic approach. I'm going to, on the next agenda item, I'm not going to want to jump into this, but there's a lot of one-time projects on here, and this has been floating on the future agenda items report for a while, and that's the budget study session that talks about our reserves. I mentioned just a little bit ago that we shouldn't be making staff and personnel commitments out into the future based on a reserve that's not likely to be replenished with our enrollment increasing. So if we don't do things to increase our enrollment, we're just kind of looking at this saying, okay, there's a point between having a brand new, really nice school and no kids in it. And I think that was something. And something else I recall, I think some of the people that want to look for the bond in the schools to be nice, look at it like, yeah, our property values go up. But I think there's a general idea that sometimes this was an issue over in the Santa Clarita Valley with College of the Canyons. When you ask for a bond and the property taxes increase, and then people start coming in from everywhere else, and the kids who actually have tax-paying parents, bond-paying parents, that are being assessed apart, can't get enrollment in some of the very basic classes and they have to wait, that turns everybody off. Again, there's no decision to be made. I am in support of taking a look at, before we discuss this, I don't want to be, as the board president, want to be telling everybody to go chase the rainbow. What I am interested in is having that budget study session that Mr. Fox asked to be put on here probably 6 months ago, and I think that will inform whether or not this is a good bet for the future. We could look at that budget and decide what we're going to do, because again, LACOE is kind of telling us between the lines, there's one-time money there, get it over with, because it may not be there. Okay, there is no action item here. Sir, thank you for your report. It was very thorough. I'll take the liberty of kicking this off. I like it that people want to put stuff on the agenda, but I think that we need to clear some of this stuff off. Looking down the list, I think that you're going to see the district civility clause update. I think that's going to come off. The budget study, we need to know that when that's going to be calendared, so we know that that's going to come off. There's an advertising BP and AR update. That has been steaming around in the background. I think that was a community thing. I'd like to at least see what those look like on an informational item in the very near future. I'm not sure what career connections are, and I think science textbook and health textbook adoptions are something educationally important. Until we get those out of the way, I'm not sure that I'm in support of adding anything to the future agenda items report. Does anyone have any comments?
I agree with you.
Thank you, Mike. Brandon?
Good.
Tim?
Good.
Kelly, if we can't get some movement on this, I'm going to ask that the board kind of take a look the next time we talk about this and prioritize this so we can get this cleaned off. I know it's a very important part about how we evaluate the superintendent's performance at the end of the year. I don't want to have him chasing down rabbit holes while this stuff sits there unattended. So what I don't want is the president of the board to be throwing stuff out there and we all sit up here and throw stuff at the wall to see what sticks. I'm going to expect that there's some recommendations. Please go back to your project list and relate back to, I remember the bond amounts being up there last time, and associate them to need and priority. And if we have to pick a pot, I'm going to want to ask, Lynn, I'm going to ask you flat out, what part of our reserve do you want to throw away today so we don't, sit up here like puppies and gaze at you and Lynn, save us. I don't want that to happen 2 years from now, okay? Sorry, guys, but that's reality. I think I'm gonna come from the point of, I don't hire a superintendent and have staff, so I can sit up here and second guess them in 4-hour meetings and twist it around and do whatever. Come out with us, tell us what your professional recommendation is, and don't let the ship sink, Lynn. Thank you.